I wasn't born with a lot of natural abilities, but the two that I was born with is that I'm a very consistent person and I'm a naturally an early riser.
What if strength isn't just about pushing harder, but about listening better? What if it's not about doing more, but about trusting more? And what if the strongest thing you'll ever do isn't lifting weights, running marathons, or climbing obstacles, but learning to hear God's voice and having the courage to follow it? That's the kind of strength Jenedy Paige lives every day. She's a professional artist, an American Ninja Warrior athlete, a mother, and a woman who has built her life around discipline, faith, and resilience. In today's conversation, we're breaking down what it really means to be strong, not just in body, but in spirit. We're talking about how to recognize when God is speaking to you, the habits that actually build a real relationship with Him, why doing things that scare you is the key to your growth, and how true strength comes from trust, not control. This episode will challenge you. It's going to push you. And most of all, it will remind you that the strongest version of yourself is already inside of you, and God is just waiting for you to trust, listen, and step forward. Let's dive in. Jenedy, thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. I drove my husband's big truck here today, and it just felt appropriate to talk about strong women pulling up in this big muscle truck.
That's awesome.
It's going to be fun. So start off just by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a mom. I've had 4 kids, and I've been oil painting professionally for about 18 years. I paint representationally. I paint spiritual themes. I've done a lot of work for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I'm also a ninja. So I've competed on 5 seasons of American Ninja Warrior, and I've been coaching at a ninja gym in Lehigh for about 3 years.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's fun when I was looking at your bio and learning more about you. I was like, I feel like we're going to introduce 2 different people who then were actually one person, and everyone's like, wait, what? She's a ninja and an artist?
I know.
Most interesting person ever.
Well, and even like, I feel like that's so much in my life. And this event that I'm planning called the Strong Woman Experience, which incorporates both these huge aspects of my life, I'm realizing is such an anomaly. Like, I feel like I'm in uncharted waters like all the time.
Which is kind of the best place to be.
Yeah, I guess.
That's like my favorite, even though it's stressful and like hard, it's also the place where the coolest things happen. So
yeah, there's a talk called The Power of Not Knowing by Liz Wiseman. Have you ever listened to that?
And I love Liz Wiseman so much.
Yes, she is such a boss.
Yes.
But that talk, I mean, it was given several years ago as a devotional at Brigham Young University, but I've listened to it so many times. And actually, it inspired a couple paintings that I've done just because I feel like I'm constantly in this place of not knowing. But it is like one of the paintings I did is called The Beauty of Not Knowing, and it's of a woman blindfolded. And I called it The Beauty of Not Knowing because I really do recognize that when you're in this space of not knowing what you're doing, that's where you see the most growth. It's when you feel the most reliant on God to direct you, and you get connected to people to help you figure out what you're doing. And so all these beautiful things happen.
Oh man, we're soul sisters, Jenedy, already. Amen. Amen.
I know. I listened to your All In podcast with Morgan, and I was like, oh my gosh, this girl is like going to be my best friend.
Yes.
We're like, have so much in common.
Well, cheers to that. Good way to start a podcast.
Yeah.
Let's start with your background as an artist first.
Okay.
What brought you to that? What do you love about that? What has that taught you?
Yeah. Well, like many things in my life, I wasn't naturally gifted at it. I kind of joke that I wasn't born with a lot of natural abilities, but the two that I was born with is that I'm a very consistent person and I'm a naturally an early riser. And that those 2 natural abilities have helped me to develop a lot of skills.
You can do anything if you have those 2, I think.
So actually art kind of came into my life in an unusual way. I was a very academic kid. I wanted to be a valedictorian and get a full ride to college. So I was on this very academic trajectory. And then we moved my senior year. We moved to a tiny town in Colorado. They didn't have any honors or AP classes available. And I was like, I guess I'll take art. So basically, like art came into my life by default. But at this tiny town, there was a teacher that introduced art to me in the form of a journal. And I had kept a journal since I was 10. And so it was literally like the perfect way to introduce me to art. And so instead of writing how you feel, you're just supposed to create images about it. And that practice like lit my heart on fire. The only problem was I couldn't really draw. So I did a lot of collaging, glitter glue, stick figures. It's very rudimentary art. But that is what made me want to be an artist. So I went to school at Brigham Young University, Idaho, and the first day of freshman orientation, I'm sitting in this big lecture hall, and they show like a PowerPoint of previous student art, and that's when I knew that I had no talent. You know, sometimes when you're in a
they were going to say that's when I knew I wanted to be an artist. I love that that's when I knew I had no talent.
That's when I knew I needed to change my major. Okay,
that was amazing.
So, yeah, like when you're in a small town, sometimes you think that you're capable because there's not any really incredible, gifted people to compare yourself to.
You're in a small pond.
We're all just kind of average together.
Yeah.
But then you go to the big pond and you're like, oh my gosh. So I actually left that meeting in tears, thinking, got to change my major. And I'm crossing the street in Rexburg, Idaho. And I felt this prompting. Like I felt God just say, Jenedy, you can be an artist. And I was like, have you seen my work? It's so bad. It's so bad. How could I possibly do it? And God was just like, I'll direct your hand. And I had honestly spent the past 8 years really trying to get to know him. And so when he told me that, I believed him. And then I just was like, well, I have a lot of work to do. So I started going to school at 4 because I found that's when the building opened for janitors, and just start with a prayer and invite God to be a part of the journey. Just be like, we both know what I can do. So if anything good is going to happen, this is going to have to be a collaboration. And that's kind of like how developing my art talent went. And I had really great teachers at BYU, Idaho, and worked really hard. And it's crazy because, you know, as I got married, I graduated and thrown into motherhood. And that practice of getting up at 4 that I learned in college, I just carried with me and was able to build an art career while being a mom.
Wow. So many things I want to dig into right now. First one, I want to back up and ask, you said the 8 years before I had come to know him, so I trusted him. What did that process look like?
Yeah, so my mom actually told me that I could have a personal relationship with God at like 10 years old. And she said that I could do it with a daily practice of writing in a journal and reading scripture and praying every single day. And she called it the PJs, prayer journal scriptures. And I was supposed to remember to do it when I put on my PJs.
I love that.
And, you know, when you first start, it's really simple. It's writing about what happened at school or who your crush is. It's really silly, really. And then you just read a few verses of scripture and then say pretty much the same prayer you said the night before. And you're like, okay, well, somehow we're going to build a relationship, but this seems all really kind of simple. But then what happened is eventually, you know, you get a little older and you have problems. And then as soon as you encounter a problem, then this pattern takes on a lot of power because you write about it. And then instead of saying the same prayer you said the night before, you're like, actually, God, I have this problem. And then when you read scripture, it's not just pick a few verses or read the next chapter. It's, I have a problem. And I've been told that if I read the scriptures, I can find solutions. And so that's when, like, through this pattern, God became very active in my life. And it was beautiful because my journal, which was started out like with silly little entries, became like, wait, God answered my prayer. Wait, God is aware of me. God exists. And it was like my journal became like another testament of Jesus Christ and that he existed because it was his dealings in my life.
So good. And then when he spoke to you in college, it was like, I believe you because I already know you.
Yeah, like you learn to recognize his voice. And then that pattern has influenced my entire life.
So good. I hope everybody out there listening who has kids, go do it. I think we can make a lot of excuses about why our kids wouldn't or why they're going to push back or whatever, but like, go make the invitation. Right. Go tell your kids, like, these are the habits that will make you happy and you're the parent. And I'm not going to go on a tangent here, but we need more moms who believe that and tell their kids and invite their kids to do the same.
Right.
So I love that. Something else I want to ask you about is the 4 a.m. mornings. I'm sure lots of people ask you about this. And I feel pretty hardcore that I'm a 5:30 girl.
Mhm. That's
So
great.
4 is like, oh, that's next level. How do you balance that with energy throughout the day, with a relationship with a spouse, with everything else? Like, does that been consistent then since college?
Well, I think like so many things in life, it ebbs and flows. Obviously, you go through like nursing a baby and you're up in the middle of the night. And, so it's something that I always have as a goal, but it's always flexible. Like in the summer, your kids are now teenagers. They want to stay up late, and so you have to navigate. But currently, yeah, I go to bed around 9 and I wake up at 4. And I think the reason I do is because for me, if I can make 4 a.m. work, it is magical. It is the magic hour. I feel so close to God. I feel like inspiration, revelation, creativity. I mean, all these things that I need for my job, for my art practice are so tangible at 4 a.m. And no one's going to distract you and no one's going to call you and no one's going to text you. And it's just you and God in my art studio. And so it really is beautiful. And so, yeah, it's not every day, it would be ridiculous to say I wake up every day at 4, but as often as I can, I do. And if I have to go to bed at 10 and wake up at 5, that's great. I just basically give myself 7 hours of sleep a night. And then I find that I have enough energy through the day. I also exercise, which I feel gives me energy throughout the day too. So,
do you have set times you do different things when you wake up? Like, tell us some other habits if you have them, want to share them.
Well, yeah. So I wake up and then I often start my day with journal, prayer, and scriptures. It's funny because my mom taught it to me. It was like at the end of the day, but for me, it's just better to do it first thing. And the hard thing about that is I can easily spend like an hour. So sometimes I gotta like rein it in and be like, okay, God, we got to get to the easel. So, but one thing I've also learned in my life is if I put God first, magically other things happen, like fall into place like they should. Like a really well-respected church leader, Henry B. Eyring, that I love, gave a talk called Education for Real Life. And in it, he talks about when he was in grad school and life was crazy. And I think he was like in a, really high demanding church calling and he had a young family. And he said that if he put God's purposes first, then he found that time seemed to be expanded. And I actually read that when I was in college and I was like, I need time expansion. Like, give me that power.
Yep.
But it's so true. So yeah, so I wake up, I try to put him first. And, sometimes scripture study for me is actually with my Bible out. Sometimes I'm painting while I'm listening to a podcast. Sometimes I'm painting while I'm listening to uplifting music. Like for me personally, like sometimes just listening to a really inspired album brings a spirit into my life just as much as reading the scriptures. So yeah, every day is just a little bit different, but I just try to make sure that I invite God in first and then trust him to help me with the rest.
I love that example of commitment, that this is what I do. I talk to God first, and flexibility. I think on social media or with popular mentors, it's like an all or nothing too often, or this is the only one way to do it. And a lot of them aren't women.
Right.
And a lot of them come out as men, like, this is my one schedule and this is what I do. And I think it's so wise for women to remember your life is in flux because you've given it to other people. Not that men haven't, not that dads don't do the same thing sometimes, but for women to remember, like, if I have 5 kids and they are the most important thing in my life. And that means when I'm talking to God, sometimes I say, hey guys, God and I are having a one-on-one that I need to finish. And sometimes it means I'll come back to this later.
Right.
And I think that leaning into that maybe takes more faith to know that it's easier sometimes to say, this is what I do every time, than to say, okay, God, what's right today?
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes I feel like it's almost like a tool of the adversary to be like, well, if you didn't do it like you did yesterday, well, then you failed. So like, you used to be a journal writer, but you missed today. So that ship sailed,
Totally.
And it's same with fitness. Like how many people are like, oh, I'm going to work out every single day. And then as soon as they miss a day, then in comes this like defeatist mentality that like, well, you were going to work out every day,
Yep.
It's way better like to just, like set these goals and then be flexible and just keep, like I talk about this gift of consistency, right? Well, I don't think consistency means you do the exact same thing in the exact same way every day. It just means like you have the consistent goals that you're working towards, and you show up every day in the best way that you can, even if today looks different than yesterday, you're still making progress towards that thing.
What I've never thought about this, but what if we championed that flexibility more as also being part of the superpower of consistency as women?
Yeah.
And as not the cop out, like I didn't do it today, but as the strength that I knew what was most important and I did that today and wasn't fearful that it would ruin some streak or knock me off my course.
Right.
That's cool. And maybe leads us into being a ninja.
Yeah.
The flexibility and the agility it takes, right? But it's really true. Like you're constantly coming back at like, here's the obstacle in front of me, and how do I adjust to that? And how do I balance on one foot versus two that I don't have anymore? And let's jump into now ninjahood.
Okay.
Ninjahood?
Ninjahood.
I'm sure that's not what it's called. But what then brought you to this? Because again, it sounds like you're introducing a second person, but it's still Jenedy in the chair.
Ninja. It's still comical to me, you know? After 6 years in my ninja journey, it's still comical that I am an athlete. Okay. So I was not an athlete growing up. I told you I was like this academic girl. So I didn't participate in any sports
at all.
No, I don't even know the rules to most sports. Okay. And then I got into running. I called myself a casual runner because I didn't really do races. It was just kind of like a meditation, and really started doing that around my senior year of high school when we moved as like kind of therapy. And we were living in this country, like farmland, and you could just run in wide open spaces. Anyways, so running carried me through early motherhood, through pregnancies, and that was just my fitness. Well, we moved to Utah in 2015 and bought this house that just happened to be down the street from a rec center. And I told my husband, maybe we should like work out sometime. Maybe we should like lift weights sometime. And so I got a pass and just started taking mom fitness classes. And it was so fun. I loved it. But that was like the beginning of building strength for me. It started very small, like most people, with like 8-pound weights. I remember when I graduated to like 12-pound weights, I was like, we're really getting strong now. Anyways, so then it was in 2018, the fall of 2018, my little brother got a pass to this climbing gym close to our home and invited me to go bouldering with him, which is climbing without ropes. And when you go bouldering, the routes are called problems. And something about that just really, I don't know, struck me. Plus, being this girl that loved math and stuff growing up, like I saw the intellectual part of this fitness aspect that I love. Like you have to solve a problem. And when you solved it and made it to the top of the climbing wall, you feel like a champion. Even if you were just doing like a baby climb, it still felt really good. So that was my beginning. I was 3 months climbing. Okay. That is so infantile for those that climb. You know, you're like laughing right now as you're listening to this. And then I had this prompting, and it was, you should apply for American Ninja Warrior. No, seriously, I'm at the gym and it comes into my heart and my mind. And like I said, I've been developing this relationship. So I recognize his voice and I go, that is insane. Like I totally just, but then every time I went climbing, I love this. God is so persistent. I mean, how many times does he give us to actually do the things that he's asking us? Because most of the time we say no because it's scary, because we don't want to do it. Like I remember as a kid, I hated like sharing my testimony, and I would feel like all the feels like I want you to share. I'm like, no. So anyways, after enough promptings of you really should just apply to the show, I had to pray about it. And it was so weird. Can you imagine? Okay. I'm like praying and I was like, God, I never thought this was going to be a conversation we were going to have, but I'm feeling, do you want me to apply to American Ninja Warrior? And you're almost scared to ask because you already know the answer. And I just was flooded with the spirit and felt, yes. And I was like, why? Now I have to do it. You know, I feel like if God asked me to do it, I have to do it.
Yeah.
So I just went online. I found the application and started filling it out. It's a lot of essay questions, believe it or not, because really they're forming a cast, right? They don't really care really who's the best physical athlete so much as who's going to be the most interesting person to have on the show. So you have to answer all these hard questions. And then I had to film an application video, and I didn't have a ninja gym anywhere close to me. I'd never been to a ninja gym in my life. So I went to a kid trampoline park where they have birthday parties. And at this trampoline park, they had some obstacles. And so that's where we were going to film. And I had never even completed those obstacles before, though I had been there with my kids, right? And I go to the starting line, and it's funny because you have all these thoughts like, I can't do this. But I'm going to have to digress a little bit and say I lost a son when he was 3 years old. And his name was Victory Morgan, and he fell in a pool. And I guess that's a story for another day. But I will tell you that as I went to this starting line to film this application video, I felt my son. And he was like, let's do this, Mom. And then all of a sudden, any hesitation, any disbelief that you have in yourself or your abilities just fades away because you have like an angel there to help you through it. So I just went. I just went. And I remember we had to go up quintuple steps, run across a rolling log, a little jumping spider, these double steps, which is like in like almost like inverted steps you climb up under. Anyways, got to the other side, and I looked at my husband and I was like, I've never done that before. And he was like, I know. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I could be a ninja. And suddenly, you know, like this whole door of possibility just opened for me. And I feel like, you know, that's one of the purposes of faith, right? I mean, how many stories do we have in the scripture where people asked to do like impossible things? So I applied in the fall of 2018, and then shock of my life, in April of 2019, I was invited to compete on American Ninja Warrior. And I remember when I got the call, you know, just looking at my husband like, oh my gosh, I actually have to do this now. Like, I have to go and compete on this television show now. And I will say that after I applied, I found a gym. It was like an hour away in Salt Lake, and I started taking classes. So I had trained a little bit leading up to competing my first season, but that's how it happened. God asked me to do it. And, you know, I went and I competed. I did surprisingly well for a rookie, but you compete with like 90 people, and then maybe they'll put 30 on television. And so they sent me this really nice email that was like, you did really awesome as a rookie, but you competed with too many celebrities and we don't have time for you on TV. And you're like, well, that's going to be like, it didn't even happen. Like, why did we do that?
Yeah.
And so then you go back and you pray, and God's like, well, Jenedy, you've been training like 3 months. What would happen if you trained for another year? And you're like,
this is a thing now.
I guess I would get better. You know? Anyways, it's now been 6 years. Yeah, now. And it's so crazy because I have never been aired on the show, but I will be aired in June for all those listening. They confirmed last fall that this next season, they were actually, like, we filmed in September, but the show doesn't air till June. But it actually is going to be aired. But all this time, you know, I competed 4 seasons and never being showed. And after the 4th season, I was kind of frustrated. Like, I remember coming back to my studio and kind of being mad. Like, why are we still doing it? It takes so much time.
Yeah.
And it's so scary. And nobody even sees it. Like, why are we doing it? And God was like, oh, Jenny, did you think this was about TV? Do you think I care about reality television? And you're like, well, I don't know. You're the one that asked me to do this. And he's like, Jenedy, look at you. You are a totally different person than you were 5 years ago. And I care way more about the development of a soul than I do about TV. And I was like, yeah, I guess you're right. So, but in all of this, you know, it's funny because God will give us something to do and we think, oh, I know. I'm going to go talk about Jesus on TV. That's why he wants me to do this. And we make all these reasons why. But the truth is that, you know, a lot of faith is going forward, even though we don't know the reasons why, and that we're patient and let God unfold the reasons to us as we go.
I did a whole podcast years ago about God gives us the what, but not the why. And often we assume the why.
I know.
And then we're devastated because we're like, oh, I felt like I should start this business and it failed. Or like you, I felt like was supposed to be on the show, and I've never actually been on the show that anyone could see. And he's like, well, you just assumed a why that I never put in there.
Right.
But just give it time and I will show you.
Right.
And I'm sure you're going to see many reasons, including the fact that you're now a freaking ninja and so strong. Something I also want to say to those listening, when I've shared stories on this podcast and people say things like, God told me, or I felt this, I wonder if women sometimes think, well, is God trying to tell me something right now? And maybe he has something really quote unquote big for me to do that's out of the blue and exciting and interesting. And then we try to make up stuff in our minds about things that he wants us to do because we all want to be important and special. And we want to feel seen by God because he gives us some unusual task, like a hero in a story. And what I hope that we actually take away from this conversation is that Jenedy has a relationship with God. And that's where it starts. And then when those calls come, you just know it. You're not making stuff up. You're not trying. You're not trying to make yourself important. And of course, we all struggle with the pride aspect. And I do want to be important. I do want people to think I'm awesome and interesting and worthwhile. But the key here is like, if you just go do some random thing that God doesn't really care about or even want you to do, it's not going to work. You have to have a relationship with him. So starting where you started, start there. Don't start at, well, maybe I could be on American Ninja Warrior. And for some people, that sounds like the worst idea in the world. And for some people, that sounds like a great idea. No, the Beth life, that thing you talked about right at the beginning, swimming in those uncharted waters, is where you're with him. And you know that you're doing what he's called you to do, even though it sounds crazy almost every single time.
Right.
I mean, my whole life, every single turn, I'm like, are you kidding me? This was nowhere in my plan. And then I look back, I'm like, but actually it was. I just didn't catch the fact that you were preparing me all along. Mm-hmm. So, okay, you're now a ninja warrior.
Well, and I do want to add that like we're so individual. And what, might take someone way out of their comfort zone to do this thing might be totally comfortable for somebody else, And so I feel like God has very specific plans and designs for each of his kids. And so, yeah, like you said, like the most important thing you can do is like develop that relationship and then just to let him be your creator, let him take you where he's going to take you. And most of the time you'll be surprised. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So good. So painting all throughout this process, mothering all throughout this process, any other ideas or thoughts or tips you give to women as you're navigating the uncharted waters and going through things that feel uncomfortable and keeping it together?
I honestly don't have any great advice other than just relying on him and seeking to have his spirit to be with you, to sustain you, to support you. Like that's how I survive. But then also having the courage to trust him and do the thing. I think that's one thing that really stops us is fear is such a huge tool and you have to go forward and do the thing. You have to, if you just do the thing that he is inspiring you to do, no matter how scary it seems, like you will see miracles unfold in your life.
I also love and thank you for sharing that sweetest story with your son. I think the faster you do the thing, the more you see miracles because you're really not ready for it. Mm. And sometimes in my life, and I know in other women's lives that have opened up and then shared their stories, through this podcast and other things, they'll say, and then I waited a year or two. And that's okay. God takes whatever we give, right? He makes the beauty from the ashes. But I think if you dare do it right away, you're going to see even more of those miracles because you'll know it's not you. You'll know you couldn't have done it yourself. You'll see those angels or feel them because you can't explain it otherwise.
Well, and also sometimes things take years. Like I think about how it was actually March 15th of 2021 and it was a Monday afternoon and I had this thought come into my head. Do you remember you saw that ninja competition online and the deadline was today? You should go enter that. Oh, you're right. So my kids, I remember, I can see this so clear in my mind. My kids are outside playing and I just pulled up my laptop and there was this ninja competition that was being hosted by like a protein company. And they were going to film like a mini American Ninja Warrior as a way to promote their brand. And all you had to do to apply was submit a video of you doing some ninja. And I felt that prompting and I did it. And it was crazy because they selected me and 2 other men to go compete head to head at this gym in Texas. And I remember being like, wait, it's me against 2 guys. Cool. But this girl named Jessie Graff, who is probably one of the best females that have ever competed on American Ninja Warrior, and she's a professional stunt woman. She was sponsored by this company, and she was emceeing the competition. So because I followed that prompting, hey, enter that competition, I was invited to compete. I go. I end up winning the competition by 1 point. And then Jessie Graff was like, congratulating me. And all of a sudden, I have another prompting. Ask her if you can paint her. No, she's like in movies. She's actually, I'm pretty sure, on a billboard somewhere in Los Angeles. Like, I'm seriously nobody. I was like, this is your moment. So you just go and do. That's what you do. And I was like, hey, Jessie, I'm actually a better painter than I am a ninja, and maybe I could paint your portrait sometime. And I have no idea when I'm doing this what God is actually leading me to, right? I think of all the time, like the Jaredites in the Book of Mormon, it's like they're praying about the next step. And God's like, hey, I'm going to meet you in the land northward. I want you to gather some animals together. Going to meet you in the land northward. Cool, got it. And then it's like, actually, I'm going to lead you into the wilderness where no man has ever been before. Okay. And you're going to cross some rivers. You're going to have to build some barges. Okay. And like each step of the way, I think, oh, this is the promised land. Oh, this is the promised land. Then they get to the shore and it's like, just kidding. You have to actually cross the ocean now. Right. And I feel like we see the end from the beginning. And so we think that Jared, like Mohanrai Moriankama and the brother of Jared, knew from the moment that, he gets the first commandment, I'm going to take you to the promised land, that, oh, we know what that means. Right. Well, he didn't. Yeah. And I think about how this one prompting, enter this ninja competition, paint this woman. And then paint this woman, and then paint this woman. And Jenedy, you need to share their stories. And Jenedy, you're going to host a conference. And I'm like, if he would have told me that at the very beginning, the whole thing, I would have been so overwhelmed and so terrified. But it's like he leads us one step at a time because he prepares us. As we do each step, it prepares us for the next until we're ready to take on the thing that he's really leading us to.
So good. Love those examples. And that is how he works. It's how he works. And the flip side of that is you can trust him that you are prepared enough, you're good enough, you've got enough right here, and that the end is worth it. And it's going to be awesome and beautiful and promised and bountiful and all those good words that we use. I'd love to jump in the conference now.
Yeah.
And how that, you said a little bit that it grew again, kind of line upon line, but what that process was like, and then what this event is going to be, and like why you want to do it, what you hope comes from this event.
Yeah. Okay. So it all started with this painting of Jessie Graff doing a pull-up. And it was funny because God's like, paint her. I don't know why. But every painting I do is like a prayer. Every painting has a message. And so the whole time I'm thinking, like, what is the message? Like, I'm flying to Los Angeles and I still don't even know what the image is that I'm going to paint, right? And
had you done athletes before?
No.
Painted athletes, right? I've seen a lot of your work, but I don't know all of your work.
I'd done a self-portrait called His Strength Is Mine, which was referring to the strength that I had felt God had given me after the death of my son. But it was more metaphorical than literal, But no, I really hadn't. So I'm at the ninja gym with this girl, and she does a pull-up, and her back is she's been a professional athlete her whole life. Like, her back is amazing. And I was like, you need to paint that. And I was like, okay. But I don't know why. And I wake up in my hotel room the next morning and God's like, Jenedy, it's like, I need you to pull up. And I was like, oh, and all of a sudden this kind of download came where it was like, Jenedy, I sent my kids to a world acted on by gravity. Downward forces are acting on my kids at all times, both spiritual and physical. And I need you to pull up. When you resist that downward pull, Jenedy, what happens? You get stronger. And when you get stronger, you can lift other people. And all of a sudden, I'm just in this hotel room by myself crying because I never saw so much in a pull-up before. And when I got the concept, I'm like, I'm painting this 6 feet by 3 feet. Like, we're going to paint this pull-up, And so
wow,
I did. And I didn't know where the painting was going to go or who was going to buy it or what I was going to do with it. I just painted it. And then it was crazy because in the process of that, God would bring these other women into my story. Like, I was literally planning a camping trip, okay, in Coeur d'Alene. And I found a campsite in Spokane, Washington. And God was like, Jenedy, who lives in Spokane? And I was like, Sandy Zimmerman. I had seen her on American Ninja Warrior. She was actually the first mother to ever hit a buzzer on the TV show, which was awesome, right? And so what do? I find her email address online. I'm like, hey, I'm going to be in your area. Could we do it? I mean, literally every painting has been like that. Like, this person falls in my lap, follow this prompting. And then as I'm working on these stories, God was like, I want the models to share their stories live. And then you're like, oh, so it's not just an art show. Oh, it's going to be a conference. I know nothing about hosting a conference. I'm an artist. I'm just supposed to be in my studio painting. Like, I don't do events. Okay. But yeah, he led me a piece at a time. And we're covering, this is the thing. I wanted to cover strength in all its forms. So it's not, I mean, I know I started out with athletes, but what it means to be a strong woman is so much more than your physical abilities. And so I'm painting a cancer survivor. I'm painting this darling 93-year-old widow that lives down the street from me that has been a source of strength in my life. I'm painting like mental fortitude and what does that look like? And I'm painting an immigrant entrepreneur. It's like, and I know that I don't have the time or means to paint every way that you can be a strong woman, but I'm just trying to give a sampling. And so at the conference, it's going to be September 26th in Sandy, Utah. The morning will be at the Hale Center Theater, which is a gorgeous venue. And then the afternoon is going to be at Impact Ninja, which is the largest ninja gym in the world. It's 44,000 square feet. And it just happens to be like across the street from the Hale Center Theater. Because you can have a strong conference and just talk about it. Like, that just seemed so silly. Like, we're all going to sit in chairs and we're going to talk about how you can be strong, So, so these women are going to come share their stories, and they all have incredibly diverse backgrounds and incredibly uplifting and inspiring stories. And then the afternoon will be the lab. And there's going to be a variety. It's not like we're all going to go do ninja for those that are like, I can't. No, it's like I'm going to have hip hop classes, aerial silks, jujitsu. But then, beyond strength classes, there is also going to be a friend of mine that's a therapist is going to talk about how strengthening your body helps you deal with trauma, like the connection between body and spirit. I want to teach a journaling class. I've got a friend talking about how you can overcome food myths. So it's going to be kind of like a broad day of covering what does it mean to be a strong woman, and the attendees can kind of pick and choose, which classes they want to attend. It's not like mandatory that everybody try ninja. But why? Why do I want to do this? Well, because I feel like God wants a strong people. I mean, if there's something that I've learned over the past 6 years of this crazy journey that God led me on, is that we are a dual being. Like you keep saying, I'm talking to two people. Mm-hmm. We are dual. We are body and spirit. And I feel like, we focus a lot on spiritual strength when we go to church on Sunday, but we hardly ever talk about physical strength. And I personally have learned that as I strengthen my body, like as I was grieving the death of my son and I had just gotten into weight training, as I would lift those weights, and it's hard, right? And you feel the resistance. But at the same time, I felt like I was building spiritual grit inside me at the same time. And so one point of the conference is to introduce women to recognize their duality, and that, some people might be physically strong and spiritually weak, and other people might be spiritually strong and physically weak. And the idea is to encourage and inspire each other with our strengths to help the other become stronger where they're weak. And then the other thing is that if there's another thing Ninja has taught me, it is that we are so capable. Like we think things are impossible, but they're not, because we are children of God. So I think about when I first started my ninja training and I was going to those ninja classes, which, by the way, were humiliating because, do you know who takes ninja classes? Teenage boys, okay? And you have to like swing on this bar and then throw your body and catch something. And I would throw and fall and throw and fall, and it feels so impossible. But what's amazing is because our bodies are divine, they adapt and they learn. Like muscle memory is a thing. And eventually you catch the bar that you thought was impossible. And when you do, you feel divine. You feel amazing. You think, oh my gosh, I thought that was impossible, and it's actually possible. And what other things, what other barriers am I putting up in my life telling myself no, but you can actually do it. It's actually possible. And so I want women to come to this conference and have what's possible for them expanded and kind of realize that as daughters of God, they have this divine nature that makes them capable of really doing anything.
So good. So good. I have felt, the past 10 years since I've been doing some work online and got off and back on, and I just feel this call for women to the same thing. Like, God's ready for strong women. Yes, as strong people, but for women to rise up who aren't afraid to say the thing, who have the courage to act on a prompting, who know how God speaks. Because I think big stuff's coming down.
I know. I actually had a friend share with me this thought that in a chess game, you carefully protect your queen and then you pull her out at the end game. And I really feel like God is calling his queen, sorry, it's going to make me like emotional, but he's calling his queens. Like, we as his daughters have so much power for good, and we have been held back for so long. And it's like, I'm calling you to take your place, So
it's time. And for women who also say, and I love being a mom, and I'm working so hard on my marriage. And this is what it's about. Not just, and I can be a boss and leave the family behind.
Right.
No, I'm doing both.
Well, and honestly, I'm going to be really vulnerable and honest with you. This morning, like, I was in my studio and I just had all these thoughts of ways that I had fallen short this week in my family, and ironically, I'm painting a strong woman right now who is a mom of 7. And in the painting, she's juggling balls and she's got like 5 of them. I guess I should have painted her with 7 balls, but it's too many for the composition. But in the painting, there's 3 hands coming off the sides that you can't see the body. You just see these hands holding the balls, and it's called When Heaven Helps You Juggle. Mm. And it's this concept that I've wanted to paint for a very long time. But it was interesting as I was working on this morning and feeling like I was lacking, and just offering this prayer as I'm working on this painting that God will continue to help me keep all the balls in the air, because it is so demanding trying to do all of the things that we really do need the help of heaven to make it work.
So beautiful. Touches me super personally. Oh, thank you. What a conversation. This was such a gift.
Oh,
Jenedy.
Are we already done?
We're out of time. I feel the same way.
It's like, I just getting warmed up over
We're
here.
just getting started. Thank you for being willing to say yes and being an example of that kind of strong woman, and for saying yes to this conference. I know it's going to bless so many women. And just the fact that you're doing it and saying yes and drawing a line in the sand to say, we can do these things, women. Like, that voice is so needed. It's so good.
Yeah, so come and let's get stronger together.
Get stronger. How can people find you? I will link it in the show notes, but people who maybe want to help with the conference or attend the conference or be a part of what you're doing, what's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, so my website is my name, jenedypaige.com, and then I also have strongwomanexperience.com. You can find me on Instagram. I'm pretty active on Instagram, posting, paintings in process or ninja craziness. And that's just, my handle's Jenedy Paige. And then I also have the handle Strong Woman Experience. We're hoping to have tickets up on the website at the end of March. Awesome. So tickets will be available soon. And yes, I welcome all help. I'm realizing that what I am doing is unprecedented, and I'm seeking sponsorship, but it's challenging because I've never done it before, and it really hasn't been done before. So it's going to take faith on the part of other individuals to support me in it, but I do welcome all help.
And you lucky sponsors who help do this, honestly, because I think this is where conferences are moving. They are going to be experiences where you leave not having been talked to and having pretty thoughts. Like, go sponsor this as your first one and then watch everybody else try to follow this model, because that's how God works. He does stuff that's like, oh, this hasn't been done, and we're going to open up a whole new way of doing things. So I'm going to be there.
Yay!
Unless I have something that calls me somewhere crazy. Like, I'm so excited to see this unfold and see the paintings. And I didn't tell you that before, but I'm deciding right now I'm going to be there. So
thank you.
Super excited about this and what you're doing. And thank you for sharing your gift with the world. Jenedy Paige is one N and no I. So Page, right? Your last name?
No, Paige.
Paige.
We'll spell that out. Jenedy Paige.
Perfect. For those who don't go to the show notes, so they can just put it right in.
Yeah.
So good. Thank you. This was a total gift, and I think we just need to do it again. That conversation with Jenedy, that's the kind of wisdom we need right now. Because strength isn't just about pushing through. It's about tuning in. It's about building the habits that keep you connected to God, having the courage to step into what scares you, and knowing that true power comes from trust, not just from effort. So here's your challenge. What is one way you can step into your strength this week? Maybe it's creating a habit that helps you hear God more clearly. Maybe it's saying yes to something that terrifies you. Maybe it's simply showing up with faith, even when you don't have all the answers. If this episode hit home, make sure you subscribe so you never miss a conversation like this. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, send it to them right now. Strength grows when we share it. Until next time, lean into your life, lean into your faith, and just watch what happens.